All right, we're starting a new segment here on the BS podcast. It's called Five Favorites. House didn't know about this. Did I tell you about this, House?
You did not, but I'm thrilled to be here, especially with our boy Dabbundo. And BS, I want you to help me. Let's get a nickname for Dabbundo.
Dabbundo is such a good name in his own right.
Great name. It's a great name.
Anthony Dabbundo is here. If you listen to the Ringer Gambling Show, he joined us this summer. He is, to call him a jack of all trades would be an understatement. Soccer, baseball, football is really his main thing, but it's really all the sports like that. I still love the fact that, Dabbundo, that you follow all baseball. Like nobody watches all baseball anymore. House and I just watch our own teams. I have no idea what's going on with any other team. You're following all this stuff. You're also young, which I think you have way more energy than us. But what's your favorite out of all the sports? Because when I first saw you, you were crushing it on football. You were putting up like one pick a week on, I think, Mondays or Tuesdays. And you were like 70, 75%. And I'm like, who is this dude? How is he doing this? So is football your favorite or is it another one?
You know, by virtue of the popularity of football, it's always going to be number one, just based on how this country consumes sports. But I do love kind of the zag energy of being a huge soccer fan. And Cerruti can attest to this too. We've been doing a soccer show there all summer on the gambling feed. And it's fun to embrace that side of it because there's so much pageantry and European beauty to the game. But in terms of like number one, every Sunday from 1 to 11, I'm on the couch watching games. Like the NFL blocks off most of my fall. And yes, it's the perk of being really young and really single and having a lot of free time that I'm able to follow all these sports for now.
House is asleep on the couch at various parts from 1 to 11, but is still joining you during that football bench. Hey, so we brought you on for Five Favorites. I asked you to pick. Right now, we're 4 weeks away. It's taping this on a Thursday afternoon. We are 4 weeks away from day one, NFL season, Thursday night. I can't wait. House, I missed it so much. I told you this. This was the year that I think I decided I like football more than basketball. I can't believe I've gotten here.
We had this conversation. You know, we could have done a podcast about it, how we're looking back across the span of our lives and the sports that were important to us. And basketball has been the thing that has cemented our relationship over these many decades. But here we are. It's football, baby. I love it so much. I'm so ready for it.
Yeah, I'm not like on September 15th. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, 5 more weeks until the NBA. I'll be excited.
Yeah.
But with football, I'm like, my wife is already looking at me side-eyed. She's like, I know I have you for 4 more weeks. And then I'm just probably going to hate your guts on Thursdays and Sundays and Mondays. And now we're going to have Wednesday games and Black Friday games. There's just games all the time. Dabbundo, we asked you your 5 favorite NFL futures right now, 4 weeks away. We're going to go in descending order from 5 to 1 to try to build the drama up, really for House. And then House is going to try to pretend he's listening while he's also kind of writing these down on some stealth notebooks. So
it's not stealth. It's right here. I'm ready.
There you go. Your 5 favorites. Number 5. Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's go with the Tennessee Titans under 6.5 wins, minus 122 at FanDuel.
Oh.
Most people don't realize that Will Levis had a lower success rate than Kenny Pickett did last year. And I think it's kind of flown under the radar because he had some really impressive highlight plays. And if you just watch the Red Zone channel, you probably saw a ton of like crazy throws and him taking on linebackers. But the offense basically relied on him throwing the ball down the field, hitting a couple big plays a game to kind of stay in it. And then Vrabel would coach up the defense and they would be really successful there. I don't really get the sense that the Vrabel departure was necessarily an on-the-field football decision and just like a strategic difference vision with the general manager and the front office there. And the most alarming thing about Levis, and I think if Joe House watched Sam Howell all last year, he would know this, his sack rates were alarming in college and in the pros. And only the Giants had a worse sack rate than Tennessee last year. They really haven't improved the offensive line a ton. It's still going to be one of the bottom 5 or 6 offensive lines.
They used the top 7 pick on a left tackle, and it's still not that good of an offensive line, right?
Exactly. PFF ranked the 1 to 32. They had them in the bottom 5. And I just wonder, they bring in an offensive coach. We didn't really know a ton about Brian Callahan. He's never really called plays. So I think there's a lot of questions about how much better the offense is. And I think there's questions, could the defense get worse? They were one of the best defenses in the red zone last year. That tends to be kind of noisy year to year. So a lot of questions about Tennessee. I do think all three teams in the division are better than they were last year. And I don't really see Tennessee taking that step forward. Again, the sack number is the one I can't get past with Will Levis.
Well, I know I could just see the delight in House's eyes. What's your immediate? I have two reactions, but what's your immediate reaction?
I mean, I've literally bet this every which way. I have Levis under yards, Levis under touchdowns, Pollard under yards, Pollard under touchdowns, Titans disaster area. This defense, especially Dabundo's last point, that pass defense was supposed to be like a pass funnel kind of situation. It was a pass fire hose. It was a disaster. And any franchise that thinks that it can make progress without Mike Vrabel as part of it, the decision making gives you significant pause. So I'm on this under. I played it every which way. I'm thrilled to have this. Welcome aboard, AD. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, that was a good first one. So I have three reactions. One, if you're going, who is the worst team in the AFC? Because we know we're going to have two or three terrible teams. Tennessee is in the conversation. New England is in the conversation. And for me, Vegas over Denver for the third spot. Not sure how you guys feel on that, but like at gunpoint, I really don't like Vegas. They seem super top heavy to me. I'm not sold on Pierce at all. I don't love their schedule. So those would be the three. So that's one. Two, if Levis didn't have that comeback against the Dolphins on Monday night that killed all of our parlays, wouldn't we be way more suspicious of the Levis thing? Because he had this really fun fourth quarter that all of us watched. We're like, oh, Levis. But for the most part, that, like, as Dabbundo said, it was flashes in the pan. And a lot of times the pan had like that sticky shit in the bottom of it that you have to like use. What's that thing? The hard thing you have to scrape off. So that's two. And then third, this is the most glaring one to me, the new coach theory, which we love. And there's a lot of good candidates this year for who's going to be the new coach bump team, right? And I think we have more candidates this year than we've had before. Could be House's team. Could be the Chargers going from Staley to Harbaugh. It could be Raheem Morris in Atlanta. Raheem Morris, second chance. Tennessee's the opposite to me. I love Vrabel. I felt like they overachieved with Vrabel every year. And I don't know why they would be better without Vrabel. So if you had to rank those three, Levis, overexposure to a couple of good moments, the fact that somebody in the AFC has to be bad, or the new coach theory in reverse, what was the number one thing driving that one for you?
I think the new coach thing in reverse, Vrabel's cost me a lot of money because as a numbers person, they never really made sense. And they just he's kind of got the Tomlin-esque nature to him where you're not quite sure how it works. You're like, he's too conservative, but then all of a sudden every game is 16-16 with 3 minutes to go and they find a way to grind a couple out. And you just don't know what you're going to get. Change isn't always good. And I think that Tennessee, when you look at how bad their defense fell off last year in the second half, and then you combine that with losing Vrabel, I don't really see the case for them being any better. And kind of clawed their way to 6 wins last year.
Yeah. House, if the Jets had just fired Saleh and hired Vrabel in May, they just said, fuck it, we have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Would you have a Jets Super Bowl ticket right now?
100%, because I'll confess right now, I do have some exposure to the Jets.
Of course you do. I mean, you bet on fucking France. Of course you did. You're always roped into the narrative.
I mean, I think they're pretty good on both sides of the ball.
Yeah,
but
they have a lot of talent.
If they had Vrabel, good God. The ticket would have been pricey. You probably wouldn't have done better than it would have been 9-1 or 8-1 because all the crazy New Yorkers would have snapped it up.
Dabbundo, what's the juice on that Titans line?
-122. FanDuel.
That's a great price.
Yeah,
that's
that feels.
Let's go.
So they would have to go.
It was the first bet I made this season when I started doing work.
So they would have to go 7-10 to beat that.
Yep.
I don't see that. I don't really see a scenario for it at all.
That division, we did some of our division previews already. I mean, that division is kind of quietly loaded. Like, it wouldn't shock me if we got 3 10-game winners. Now, I'm not predicting that, but it wouldn't floor me because I think Indianapolis is right there. And
I'd be floored by Jacksonville.
I don't know.
I don't
Jacksonville's the post hype. Everybody's in on Jacksonville after being out on them.
I don't see the Jacksonville thing. Good luck betting on Trevor Lawrence. All right, what's your number 4?
All right, we're going to go with another under. We're going to go to your favorite division, House's favorite division, the NFC South. Tampa Bay Bucks under 7.5 wins plus 122. So Baker Mayfield has this resurgent season out of nowhere. And going into last season, the narrative was, all right, Tom Brady retires. The Bucks roster's falling apart. They're going to have a kind of a tank rebuild season. And then out of nowhere, they're hosting a playoff game and they win a playoff game and come within one drive of going to the NFC Championship because Baker just goes and has this incredible season, gets Dave Canales a head coaching job. All of these things go right for Tampa.
4:30, Dave. Let's end practice at 4:30. We got to spend time with our family. Love that guy.
Love work-life balance. Love that. And I'm actually interested in Carolina. Maybe Bryce Young might be a bridge too far.
Calm down, Dabbundo.
If you want to get a little crazy, they're interesting.
This is your first appearance on the pod. Calm down. Take a breath.
So Nick Giffen, my old colleague at the Action Network, he has a metric called Luck Rankings, which essentially looks at play to play, how good are you, and then compares it to the final record. And last season, number 1 luck ranking team was Pittsburgh, which should surprise nobody. Number 2 was Philly. They were number 1 until their collapse. And number 3 was Tampa Bay. They ran really good in terms of red zone defense. They were one of the luckiest teams in the NFL. And you can just see how this doesn't quite work trying to run it back. And maybe when we look back on last season, we'll say, hey, maybe Tampa would have been better off if they hadn't had so much success. Because now I think they're perfectly a purgatory team.
It's like the Giants a year ago, right? It's like that 9-7-1 in a playoff, and all of a sudden you get fooled into thinking you might be good.
That's actually a perfect comp for what this is. Everybody thinks Baker Mayfield's better than he really is. It's similar to what Daniel Jones, and it's different because I think Jones is a little bit younger than Mayfield, and we haven't seen as much from him. But again, they lose Carlton Davis from their secondary. They hire Liam Cohen from the McVay tree to be the offensive coordinator. Big loss in terms of play calling duties and how that will work. Don't know how Baker responds in another year in this system. So I'm going with the Bucks under. I think it's a pretty bad division. And I think, unfortunately, you can't bet against all 3 teams. It's kind of hard to do that because they're all correlated against each other. But I think Tampa is the most overvalued of those top 3 NFC South contenders.
House, what are your feelings on Dabbundo, Philadelphia guy, Syracuse guy, just predetermined to just be kind of glass half empty, starting off the pod with 2 unders? Not surprised. I got to say, I'm not surprised.
No, he comes by it honestly. He's an analytics dude. He does maths. He likes the maths. So unders always have positive expected value plus EV. Isn't that how they say it out there? AD, come on, Bundo.
The nerds.
Bundo.
The nerds.
Yeah.
Sheil Kapati is trying to make Tony Buns happen. I don't think it's going to stick. We've been doing some Philly special podcasts.
That's not. I don't hate that. All right. So here's my counter on this Tampa pick, which I do like. It looks too easy. That's one. NFC South, is it just a hornet's nest? Do you just stay away? Is the entire division just to stay away? I don't feel. You can kind of look at every team and go, or you go, ugh. And I don't feel good about any of the 4. And I think anybody who's looking at that division and going, I know exactly what's going to happen, is fucking kidding themselves. That would be my counter. So is there, you don't have to tip it off now, but are there other teams you like, or do you feel like that's just all 4 of those teams are either unders or stayaways?
Well, that's why I think Carolina, if they can get anything out of Bryce Young, if he plays anywhere close to his draft pedigree and isn't a total bust, they're going to be in the mix potentially just because of how bad everyone is. I mean, essentially the Falcons and the Saints have flipped, where last year Saints win total was 9.5. Everybody was like, oh, the Saints aren't really that good, but they're definitely better than everybody else. And their schedule is really easy. And look at how many games they're favored in, but they actually aren't a good football team. And now they've flipped with the Falcons. And so I would argue that, maybe if you had to pick one of those 3, I would go with New Orleans. Their offense was quietly good at the end of the season last year. And the luck rankings that I mentioned earlier, they were dead last. So all of a sudden you're like, wait, maybe the Saints have something, but the Saints are in a similar position to Tampa where they're in purgatory. They keep running it back. And I don't really want to put my money behind Derek Carr to overachieve the market because that seems like a disaster that could implode at any moment. So I think that's why this division is fun. There's a stat I'm going to mention later about teams going worst to first. Happens almost every year. I'm not trying to, again, I'm trying to cool my jets here, but Carolina is super interesting to me.
House, if I gave you 2 tickets and one of them was the Saints to win the NFC South and the other one was a special off the menu FanDuel parlay bet of Dennis Allen will not be the Saints coach in week 10 and Derek Carr will not be their starting quarterback in week 10. Which ticket would you take from me?
I don't understand. Like that's the all-time no-brainer. There's no challenge there. I fucking hate the Saints. They are a forever never bet under any circumstances. Dennis Allen, we've had this so many times right in our face. And I'm not doing it ever again. I hate this Tampa play by Dabbundo because what it requires is you have to make a commitment to Atlanta, and everybody's on Atlanta, and Atlanta's the sexy story, and I hate that. So the way that I ended up playing this dumb division was the Atlanta to win the South, the NFC South at like minus 120 because it's the only price that I could
stay away from wins completely. Yeah, it's
no way. I'm not messing with that.
There's a Raheem Morris case for them, just that, maybe there's a level of coaching competency that they just didn't have last year. I hate taking a team that's just got nothing from a top 8 pick. Like Penix isn't going to play. He's this asset that you could put a starting left tackle in there. You could put a elite corner,
a pass rusher.
You could put a Dunze in there.
Things.
Like
they have no pass rush.
Even the guy the Seahawks took 16th, that guy would have been awesome for them. And they just whiff on the pick for at least this season. So that makes me nervous. I like the instinct to go under with Tampa though, because they really do remind me of the Giants last year.
I think modern medicine is great now, but Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles in October.
Right.
I mean, it is a quick turnaround. It used to be a year. Now it's like 10 months. Aaron Rodgers said it was like 3 months.
And he's
really old.
I don't want to...
New coordinator, new coach, new scheme, coming off a major injury.
And
it just seems like there's a lot of risk.
There's plenty to be skeptical of. I really don't want to prolong the agony and make us talk about Carolina any further. But I do want to ask AD, how can you have any confidence in that defense? Because it's one thing for them to lose Burns, but Frankie Louvu is a whole nother ball
he's
of wax.
on your team now.
That's right. That's the reason that we have good vibes up here in the DMV. Yeah. That defense, I think, took a huge, they're putting a lot of pressure on JC Horn, who can't stay on the football field. Yeah. That's right. Exactly. So talk me into the defense. I mean, I'm listening. It's August. Let's try and make some money now.
I'm not listening. I might go to the bathroom.
Yeah, it was one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, and they haven't really improved against the pass here. So, I'm not saying they're going to be a great team, but again, this is more of a factor of the circumstance and the fact that I do like Evero, the defensive coordinator. He was getting a lot of head coaching buzz, even though he was on one of the worst teams, coaching one of the worst teams, which I think says a lot about him. If teams are able to see through the fact that they were an absolute disaster, especially against the run. They were like a league average pass defense though last year. So, it's not the end of the world, I think. But in this division where the ceiling is so low, if Bryce Young, maybe, Canales can work some magic into him, I don't think he'll ever be able to achieve the athletic limitations. Like the ceiling that we think is possible for Bryce Young, I think is pretty out the window after what we saw athletically last year and how bad he was. It's very unlikely he goes from terrible to great, but I think it could go from terrible to average. And I'm not sure that average is not the best quarterback in this division come December.
Well, so if you're making the case, it's a little like if you're making the glass half full case for Houston a year ago, we're like, well, weird division. What if this happened and this happened and this happened? And what if the coach is awesome? And what if Stroud is way better than you think? And you list like 7 things. And then for Houston, all of them hit. For Carolina, the coaching situation was, I think, probably the worst in the league last year. House's guy, Frank Reich.
My guy, Frank Reich, too.
An immortal quote from last August, Ringer Gambling Show, when House called Frank Reich the best coach in the NFC South, which we've made fun of him for a year. But then you think like the worst skill position guys in either conference. And going down the line, it was not a good offensive line. It was the worst pot. And then Stroud's doing well. Every single thing was bad for Bryce Young. So I see the case, but the case to me is more this division's so bad, somebody's got to win. And this is Raheem's been making this point on Ringer Gambling. Like, why not at 11-1? Like, why not? On the other hand, I would probably book that bet. We have 3 left, 5 favorites. Anthony Dabbundo, NFL futures. What is number 3?
All right, let's take a more positive spin now. We're going to go a team I like this year. Seattle Seahawks. It's a twofer. Plus 175 to make the playoffs. 7-1 to win the division. You're starting to see some cracks in San Francisco. The Ayuk stuff happening. McCaffrey just picked up a calf injury. It's easy to forget that San Francisco every year was, can they stay healthy? They had all these injury issues. Well, guess what? The whole team just about stayed healthy last year. And it was probably, a 95th percentile San Francisco outcome outside of a couple of games in the middle of the season where they had that blip and Purdy looked a little lost. I think he was concussed. Now they're one of the oldest teams in the NFL last year. They pretty much run it back offensively, potentially without Ayuk, who some who watch film and know more ball than I do say was their most valuable offensive player outside of McCaffrey. So I think there's some real threat for them to take a step back, especially with the Super Bowl hangover and getting so close and not quite, getting to the apex like they did last year. And Jim Harbaugh is getting all of the credit and all of the clout because of his track record. But I actually think the team that has the chance to make a real step forward is Mike Macdonald and the Seahawks. And he basically had the entire Baltimore defense last year put in career years, elevates talent across the board. Nobody was saying, wow, look at how talented Baltimore is defensively until last year when everybody was looking across the board like, whoa, they got this production from Jadeveon Clowney and Roquan Smith's a great player, but Patrick Queen, like we're not sure about him.
Some
now
secondary stuff too that people weren't expecting.
Exactly. Made it work with pretty inconsistent corner play because of injuries. Like they schemed their way into the best defense in the NFL. And what I like about McDonald is that he doesn't come across as his background is in finance and management. It's not like your traditional football guy, so to speak. And he's very young. And I think he's going to get buy-in from this locker room who just felt like Pete Carroll had kind of run its course. The defense was antiquated. They bottomed out so badly last year defensively to the point where they were at one point 30th, 31st in defensive metrics. Right. And if you just fix the defense to make it league average, and they've made some improvements there, especially against the run where they were really bad last year. I think that combined with the fact that they still have a ton of weapons on offense could get them to be the kind of sleeper post-type team, because 2 years ago, they were projected to be one of the worst teams. Geno has this renaissance year out of nowhere. Everybody buys the Seahawks. They kind of take a step back. Now they're the post-hype in the point where people are kind of overlooking them. A lot of people are taking LA. I think LA's got a lot of cracks. I think Seattle is the team that's going to make a run at this division.
So over is still 7.5, or did that go up?
7.5 is juiced, yeah.
With juice. Divisions in the plus 750 range. I'm with you. I mean, I think you undersold the McCaffrey injury because I was listening to our fantasy football pod yesterday, and they were like trying to figure out where to rank McCaffrey in the running back rankings. It's the classic, what do you do? How much does he go for? It's clear he's going to be compromised the first month. House, ironically, the first month was what I had pegged for the easy part of the Niners schedule. They're home Jets, at Minnesota, at the Rams, home Pats, home Arizona. And I was like, that's got to be probably 4-1. But now no McCaffrey, and the schedule gets harder as the year goes along. Trent Williams, I don't know if he's even back yet from the holdout, so we don't know what kind of shape he's going to be in. Debo, I'm never going to bet on him playing 17 games. Purdy's playing for a new contract. Ayuk, the situation's kind of nuts. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. What do you think of the Seattle pick, House?
So I love when I'm in the spot of being in violent agreement with Dabbs, because when we first met each other, I confessed to him that I would read his column voraciously, every week as it came out on the Action Network. And, it influenced my thinking. I tried to give credit where credit was due. Well, now I can just tell him, bro, I'm stealing your stuff because I love it. But I already am all over this.
House was like Drake just stealing verses from rappers on the internet and claiming he hadn't heard of them.
No, I gave shout outs. I mean, I tried my best. Yeah, everybody knows how old I am. But here's the thing with Seattle. I think that they won 9 games and still underperformed. I think the talent really on both sides of the ball is the compelling thing to me. And I don't really, the price is right for the division play. I don't think that we have to really like talk down San Francisco. We can just kind of talk up what Seattle
why is
has.
Seattle 2 wins worse when, they lucked out with Byron Murphy falling to 16. It was exactly what they needed.
Amazing.
JSN's in year 2. And I think let's be honest, like Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick were in their 70s, and there was signs of real slippage and strategic, weird shit going on. And now you bring these new voices, new coaches. I thought McDonald was great last year. Like, to me, he's the odds-on favorite for the new coach theory.
I agree.
It's for the
there's a lot more talent in the room than what the Chargers have with LA. And
totally agree. Agree.
And basically, it's like, can they take the Rams' spot?
Unless
you think there's 3 playoff teams from this division, which, by the way, isn't inconceivable.
They grabbed that offensive coordinator from Washington, a dude that loves to throw the ball down the field, and one of Geno Smith's strengths happens to be throwing the ball down the field 20 yards or longer. He's in the top 10 of the league at that. Let's start using these weapons that the Seahawks possess.
Well, Dabbundo, they were a top 5 offense early downs. So if you just go first and second down, they were one of the best. They were right up there with San Francisco, with Green Bay, with Dallas, as some of the best offenses in the league. And it was third downs and their offensive line that really cost them offensively. The key for them are the tackles. Great rookie year, took a step back last year, had injuries. The O-line is definitely their weakness. They're a bottom 5 or 6 unit by most metrics. But if the tackles go back to what they were as rookies, then it's more of an average team and you can get away with that.
I have multiple texts to Seahawks fan Danny Kelly of The Ringer. I started my prep 3-4 weeks ago, and this was one of the overs that just I thought was pulsating. It's like, why is this 7.5? Why would they be 2 wins worse? I could understand 8.5, but 7.5. I haven't made all my official picks yet. I'm waiting for the extravaganza with Sal. This Seattle is one of the ones I circled. And I think the question for me is, could this division produce 3 playoff teams or not? Because I think Green Bay and Detroit both make it. One AFC South team. So then the other question would be, does one of these teams take Dallas's spot? And I think from a talent standpoint, if you compare Dallas to Seattle and the Rams, I don't think Dallas has more talent than either of those teams. They might be in the vicinity, but I wouldn't say they're more talented. So we'll see. I like that Seattle pick. All right, I can't believe I really like the first 3. I can't even what you have in store for the final 2. I can't wait.
We're going to stay positive for the last 2. Cincinnati Bengals to win the AFC North plus 165.
Okay.
Yeah. Going along with the Mike Macdonald discussion is that Mike Macdonald left Baltimore, and I have concerns about whether Baltimore, we're buying really high on them, right? At this point last year, the Ravens were 3-1 to win their division. The questions were, Lamar, can he stay healthy? Can he stay healthy? No. The answer prior to last year was no. Now he has the MVP season, and now everybody wants to drink the Lamar, Kool-Aid and get excited about how good Lamar Jackson is, and rightfully so. When he plays, they're a very good team. But I think the defense,
Lamar, isn't he? Did he lose weight?
Has some concerns. Exactly, and his immune system is very weird. He's sick more than any professional athlete I've ever seen. It's interesting, but offensively, second year under Monken, I think teams will be able to adjust to them a little bit offensively and what they were doing. And the skill positions aren't really still that great. So outside of Zay Flowers, we have the oft-injured Mark Andrews and then some real questions along the offensive line and the skill positions. So I think there's some real questions. And look, if their plan is to just run, Derrick Henry into the line 30 times a game, I'm willing to take my chance that will not be great at this point in his career. And I keep counting out Derrick Henry and he keeps proving me wrong. So maybe I'll look like an idiot in a month or 2. But the biggest thing for me here, the Bengals have a last place schedule, and it plays a huge role in the differences in the matchups because the Ravens and Bengals will play 14 games that are exactly the same, including the 2 against each other. The difference is that Baltimore will play Buffalo, Houston, and Tampa. Cincinnati gets to play New England, Tennessee, and Carolina. That's like a 2-win gap in terms of win probability, wins across the season. I'm not sure that the Bengals are any worse than the Ravens as currently constructed. Cincinnati improved their defense, which was a problem last year in the secondary. Just this time last year, everybody was saying Lou Anarumo is like the best defensive coordinator in the league, and now people have forgotten about him. I'm back in on Cincinnati. Hopefully Burrow stays healthy. Hope they win the North.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't even realize this as it was happening, but last year the NFC had the 9 road games because they moved to the 17-game schedule, and this year it's the AFC. So when you look at those 9 road games, some of the 9 road games slate, you're like, ooh, that looks brutal. They have the opposite. I mean, they obviously have Kansas City, but they're on the road against Carolina, against the Giants. In week 11, they're at the Chargers, which is basically a home game because the Chargers don't have fans. They're at Dallas in week 14, which normally is terrifying, but I don't know if Dallas is going to be good this year. At Tennessee and then at Pittsburgh in the last week, but it's not as intimidating. I guess the question for me with the Bengals, it's the Burrow piece. House, what do your little birdies say about Burrow? They were talking about this is a wrist injury that no professional athlete has gotten before. Like some of the crazy wrist. No, it's going to be fine. But there's been a lot of conjecture and talk and rumors about it, and it just scares me. What do you think, House?
Yeah, and some of that, thought sharing was occurring like on the grounds at Bengals camp, and folks I think are highly attuned to watching Joe Burrow, get comfortable in the role that it seems like the Bengals want to put him in, which is under center to protect him a bit more. But yes, this wrist injury, by some indication, is a 1 of 1. I'm not touching the Bengals at all because of how
I think this is a stay away for me too. Yeah. I kind of want to see it.
Exactly. That's my view.
Because the thing is, they're definitely worse at running back, definitely worse at defensive back, and they lost DJ Reader, who I thought was important for them, right? So if you're going to tell me Burrow is awesome this year, like he's one of my favorite football players. Like I'm not betting against him. We've lost money to him. We've won a lot of money on him, and they went 9-8 last year, and he was basically messed up most of the year. Dabbundo, what do you think about this? Is it okay if I wait until after week 2 at Kansas City? They play the Pats week 1. They're going to win that. If they lose that Pats game, then all the money you would have put on the Bengals anyway, you're like, oh my God, this is the worst bet I've ever made. And at Kansas City, get a feel for what that looks like. They're probably going to lose and then kind of wait in after week 2. Have you ever done the wait and see with the future or no?
I think it depends on what the schedule looks like. The scary thing here is like Kansas City is the kind of team that can be got early in the season. And so if you do wait and they win that game, all of a sudden you're cooked, right? So, and you look at their schedule. Now the Bengals have been slow starters just about every year with Burrow, but New England at Kansas City, Washington home at Carolina. That's the first 4 weeks. You're not going to get a much friendlier start. Then they play New York in week 6. So after Baltimore at home in week 5, like it's a pretty friendly first half. And, it just gets at the point. Like if you go compare that to what Baltimore has to run through in terms of rest disadvantages too, with Baltimore at the end of the season, their schedule gets really tough where they're playing. They have the Wednesday Christmas game after the Saturday war with Pittsburgh.
That's unbelievable that they did that. It jumps out like I just can't believe that they think that way with the football schedule. Like that's a good idea to do that.
They're taking Christmas. They're stealing it from the NBA.
Crazy. The other case that I don't think can be understated is Deshaun, a full year in Cleveland, a team that had good vibes last year down the stretch with feel good Joe Flacco. And Deshaun, it's already like just feels not awesome. And what if they just stink? And then Pittsburgh with this weird Wilson Fields thing that they feel like they haven't totally navigated yet. So it does feel like this division is a little weaker than it did. I'm a little higher on Baltimore's weapons than you because the other tight end on the Ravens, I think everybody's been going nuts about. And I do kind of like the Derrick Henry. Like maybe they can get one awesome year out of him. Where do you stand on the Derrick Henry awesome for 1 year house in Baltimore? No?
I'm not sold. Yeah, I'm lukewarm. I I think their offensive line doesn't, instill a ton of confidence, but this division is impossible to handicap because my instinct is to do what Dabs did there, which is to fade Baltimore. And this schedule thing is compelling. Like the Bengals absolutely by far have the easiest run of it in the division. But the problem is you have to talk yourself into Cleveland, and you just laid out the case for why that might be a bit of a challenge.
I'm not going with Nick Chubb coming back off a catastrophic knee injury and Deshaun Watson with a frown on his face. No, thank you. All right, it's time. So I've agreed on 3. To me, since he's a stay away, but I could also see myself on like September 3rd when I just want to. By the way, I didn't tell you guys. I haven't talked about this on the pod. I intentionally have not bet on a single NFL future yet because I look back on my future bets last year and there was just carnage from June and July before I really had a handle on it, where I just jumped. I was like, the Giants, why is that so low? And just betting overs and stupid shit. I had the Giants Pats overs. It was just embarrassing. And I salvaged a lot of it in late August, early September. So this year I put an artificial deadline of August 25th. I'm just not allowed to bet NFL futures until August 25th. And that's what I'm doing. Okay, here we go. Number 1, Anthony Dabbundo, his favorite NFL future of the 2024 season. Let's hear it. Uh-oh.
All right, so I bought this.
Props. He brought props.
I bought this in week 8 or 9 of last year, and just decided to become a huge Jordan Love fan. Liked him in college, kind of forgot about him for a few years. Remembered that he was on the Packers going into last season. And I was sitting there watching a couple of games, and his receivers were letting him down, and they were just a little bit off, and they were so close to winning some games. And I'm like, this team feels like they're going to turn the corner. And in the second half of the season, he was one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL by the efficiency and the comparison metrics and the accuracy metrics, EPA and CPOE that we
won
look
House
at.
and I money in the playoffs. We love Jordan Love. We love anyone that wins us money.
Exactly. And down the stretch, they were a really, a big cash cow. They had some big wins. The Thanksgiving Day win in Detroit. They had the upset of the Chiefs. And then you saw the holes in the second half too, which were, and one of the most impressively bad defensive stretches you will ever see. In 3 consecutive weeks, they got diced up by Tommy DeVito, Baker Mayfield.
It was so horrible.
And Bryce Young, who had the best game of his career against Green Bay in this Joe Barry defense. Well, Joe Barry's gone. Thank goodness. They bring in Jeff Hafley, who had been a coordinator at the college level and had been a defensive backs coach. Somebody I thought was really going to turn around Boston College, but harder to do that than just one coach. It's a structural issue in Boston College and playing in the ACC, whatever. But Hafley leaves BC, a head coaching job in college, to take an NFL defensive coordinator job. And I think it's a great hire. I think Hafley is a good defensive mind. And you combine that with how young this offense is, and we know that LaFleur is an excellent offensive coach at using different formations and different schemes to maximize the talent. There's no obvious number 1 guy, but they have so many guys who could become that I think this offense is really exciting. The offensive line does have some shuffling to take care of, but in terms of offensive line, offensive coordinator, and then just improving by getting rid of Joe Barry, the only thing that scares me is the kicking game. Anders Carlson appears to be the favorite to win the job, and he was horrible last year. But Green Bay, 2-1 to win the NFC North. Last year, one of the most heartbreaking losses of my life was Lions to win the NFC, 12-1. It was my first bet last year in May, and I was already cashing the ticket. I was counting the money, and they blew it. This year, I'm kind of down on Detroit, and I'm in on the Cheeseheads to win the division.
It was the moment these unders came out, it was the under that jumped out, and I didn't understand why it wasn't 10 or 10.5. Super Bowl 19-1 is interesting for them too. The number 1 seed in the NFC, which I think on FanDuel is plus 750. Best record in either conference is 17-1. 12 plus wins for them is plus 245. You laid out a lot of the case. I mean, it rejuvenated Josh Jacobs would also be a fun piece of this, but I really like their receivers. And it's one of those things where I'm not even positive who the best fantasy receiver out of those 4 guys are, but the totality of it, love getting paid. The fans are just all in on this team. And then the juxtaposition of that with Rodgers and the Jets and whatever's going to happen with that, there's a feel-good feeling of that. And then House, the other thing, you want to say like it's Detroit's year. This is it. This is the year they step up. They're getting a lot of Super Bowl buzz and a lot of hype. They had a really awesome year last year. Like you go back and they were 12-5. They beat the Rams, they beat Tampa, and they lost by 3 points in the conference title game. Like that was an awesome year. It's hard to do that 2 years in a row when you have your breakout awesome year. And I'm struggling with them a little bit because I do think top 4 talented roster. No question. Top 5, top 6, somewhere in there. But a lot of things went right for them last year. And I wonder when you have all the expectations now and the hype and the Lions fan base, like, oh my God, we're going to make the Super Bowl this year. Look at what's happened to the Niners. Dallas is worse. Like Philly's, there's a Sirianni, Hurts didn't get along all last year story. And the NFC, like, this is our time. We have this. And we've just seen with football that a lot of times the football zags when everything is zigging. Where do you stand on them, House?
I like them, but don't love them. I like them at like 10 wins, maybe 11, because they were in the zone for 11 wins last season. I want to sit tight for a little bit, and I understand that you're going to lose out on some of the good pricing here.
You're talking on the Packers.
Yeah, the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, exactly. I want to sit tight, and I want to see that defense a little bit because I feel like after watching, I lost a lot of money when Baker Mayfield went out there and beat their ass. I mean, I hold that against them. And we had some money line exposure to them beating San Francisco, and that mother effer Carlson, who should have been sent back to Europe as soon as that game was over, still being in the mix hurts my feelings. So I just have some bitter flavor in my mouth around them, but they for sure are live. I like that NFC North bet. I do still have a lot of respect for Detroit, and I think that Detroit is in as good a position as any to do the hard thing, which is, hold up their end of the bargain in a repeat kind of season. But I like Green Bay very much. They're in the playoffs. They're a 10 or 11 win team. I don't mean to suggest anything different. I just am not all the way there with the full ebullience for this one.
Couple tough road games for them, and then a couple ones I really like. Like they're at the Rams week 5. That'll be, I would say, 40,000 Packers fans at that game. They're at the Jaguars. I don't think the Jaguars can be that good. They're at Minnesota, which will probably be a mess. They're at Tennessee. It's funny. At Philly, Friday night, week 1, September 6th. That might be the most interesting week 1 game. And I've somehow avoided all the lines, but that's the one where I have a lot of questions I want answered about both of those teams. And especially as you read, I know you're an Eagles fan, Dabbundo, but as you read some of the stuff that's trickled out since the season ended, and now that we're in training camp, and then the big now they tell us piece about Sirianni and Hurts. I just have real questions about them. I just want to see it. Like, what is this going to get worse or better? Like, because you could argue Sirianni is a first coach fired candidate if it doesn't go well for them right away, right? Or you could argue they're going to be back on track and be awesome. So Green Bay going in there, and if Green Bay just whips the ball around and just kicks their ass, that will feel like the overreaction for week 1, right? Packers, they're for real. Oh my God, Super Bowl. We do this every year with week 1, and that was the one I circled. On the flip side, Philly laying it to them. People of the Eagles, they're back. Packers, young team. We'll see. Eagles back. So I feel like that's the overreaction game. Are you nervous about that game as an Eagles fan?
So it's tricky. My relationship with the Eagles. I live outside of Philadelphia and grew up a Colts fan. So I'm kind of like indifferent about the Eagles. I follow them closely.
You're not an Eagles fan. Interesting.
No, most people.
So you're
have
Philly.
assumed this.
You're Philly.
Except the Eagles, which is like sacrilegious.
But you don't care. Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Some have called me a hater just by my nature of being a contrarian.
That's really glass half empty. I just assumed. So you're
but I'm excited for it. I mean, I think it could go so many different ways. Hurts and Sirianni do not seem like the type of personalities that immediately mesh. And based on the reporting in that Tim McManus story, like it doesn't sound like they're on the best of starts. They're going to show for the cameras, but at the first sign of trouble, this could still turn really ugly. But the talent, like if you just line up talent on talent, this is still one of the 3 best teams in the NFC by far. So
I like Packers 9.5, and I think as long as that's single digits with the over under, I still feel like that's a really good bet. Well, just
the
quickly
thing about
good.
The thing about Green Bay, if you look at their road schedule, it's actually pretty friendly. So they're going to play the Eagles in Brazil, so they don't have to go to Philly, which is a huge swing, right? That Friday night early game, they'll get extra rest coming home for their home opener against Indy. And then if you look at some of their road games, they get Jacksonville right after Jacksonville plays 2 in London. Then they go to Chicago, but it's off their bye week. So some of their tougher road games, they go to Seattle, but it's after extra rest. They'll have 10 days to get ready for that game. So a lot of their big road games are either not road games at all, or they're in a rest advantage where, another team is at a disadvantage, or they're getting extra rest to get ready for them. So I think that's an underrated part of the Green Bay schedule. But again, like they're basically a coin flip in week 1, and that will have a huge leverage in terms of the NFC.
House, that look of disappointment on my face was having done 5 weeks of prep and not realizing that Philly Green Bay was in Brazil.
Oh, I thought you knew.
Even the great slip up. Yeah, for some reason I had it marked down as at Philly. But this is what happens. We're trying to do 900 things. Just quickly before we go, you said you're a Colts fan. So over 8.5 for them, division plus 310. 11 plus wins, plus 285. They were 9-8 last year. They added a pass rusher. Richardson is back. Just what's your lean?
They might be the worst secondary in the NFL. But Richardson is so exciting. I don't know how you could take an under on them. So I think they're like a 9-10 win team. So I would lean to the over. But again, Richardson could go down again. And I don't expect Joe Flacco to be able to recreate last year's magic if that happens. But yeah, certainly the offense is exciting. The offensive line is the top 5 unit again, which has not been true for a long time. So the fact that they're kind of back is huge for their outlook this season. But yeah, the secondary, they played a lot of bad QBs last year, got away with it. The corners, it's real ugly. So I think there's some concerns defensively about Indy.
I agree. They're a stay away for me. How, stay away for you or no?
No, I bet they're over.
Everybody likes them.
Fair. You've bet every team.
Because Steichen was so impressive last year.
Yeah.
I mean, making Gardner Minshew look like a viable quarterback, and that team being 1 play away from making the playoffs, like that. Right. That's in the first season. It was so impressive. And we get a fully healthy Jonathan Taylor for a full season behind that offensive line. I think Indy's live.
All right. That was 5 favorites, and segment that we tested out was supposed to be 25 minutes, and we went for 50. Anthony Dabbundo, great to see you. Joe House, thanks as always. I appreciate it.